So first, thanks for the interest in my laptop talks and the specific request for this one. I've been asked to talk about the Operation Goddess Temple thing and basically the state of, you could say, the war on sex, the old traces of the old Abrahamic religion's war on sex that still are at play in the world. Um, it's going to be a long one. So maybe get really comfortable, settle down. We're going to take a bit of time. Or pause until you can do that. And if you're going to pause and come back to it later, in the meantime, if you feel to research anything around this, I suggest just start with a Google search of Operation Goddess Temple. That's it's a very typical story of the kind of thing that's been going down in America, but not typical, and it reaches my attention because it happened to be really accidentally or deliberately. It turned out to be very specifically targeted. Um, anyway, if you've paused, if you're back now, and so on, we're going to carry on. This has to start a bit with a history lesson, I'm afraid. A bit of history about the strongest player in America, or certainly in the state of Arizona at this moment in this area. Now, strangely, this has got to be a story of the Irish. So, once upon a time, back when slavery was still a thing, the Irish were also slaves in much of the world, certainly in the USA. And they weren't, sort of within the rankings of slave. They weren't at the top of the game. In fact, they were right at the bottom. You could buy an Irish slave for around about a tenth of what it would cost you for a good, loyal, strong, hard-working African, was the view. And, market value determines treatment. So everything you've ever heard about the treatment of black slaves in America and so on, well, there were the Irish white slaves worth only 10% of that. Go figure. I mean, one of the main historical little tricks for getting rich in the slave game in America was to buy cheap Irish women and then breed them with your black slaves, and the mulatto slaves were worth more than Irish. Maybe not as much as, pure black, but because the market got this kind of color view going, that sort of established things. And fast forward a little bit to where union movements were getting going, and to where the division, this great disparity that we now see in the world was really getting going, of this division of rich and poor. And the Irish play an interesting part in the story there, because at that point it was clearly rich versus poor. And in a very sort of exquisite example and strategy of divide and rule, what the powers in America did was they declared the Irish to be white. And they did two things in doing that. One was they drew a nice clean color line, that the slave peoples are the dark-skinned ones. And the elite, which is white now, all whites kind of qualify as being in that elite, including the Irish, who used to be only worth 10% of a black slave. The other thing that happened was that sort of really had a big impact. It was very powerful in terms of breaking a lot of the will of the resistance movements, of the political worker kind of orientated movements of the time, and got things a bit more under control for those that like to run the place. And it was even useful in terms of the suppression of the poor classes, because now you had a lot of poor people, but available for employment into higher things like being very particularly police officers. Around the world we know about the Irish American policeman as a stereotype. And so these once comrades of their fellow poor people actually became the people in charge of suppressing them. History has its little turns. So fast forward again a while, and the Irish people had come along in America without the artificial restraints and constrictions against them. They flourished. And they got richer. And they started a movement to get themselves really accepted and so on as really part of the culture, much as gay people have been doing lately. And they had they formed clubs and societies, and the most important, most relevant one to my story is the Knights of Columbus. Now, most of us would think of the Knights of Columbus, if we know anything about it at all, as a kind of a bit like the Masons at the kind of or round table, a drinking club for the guys in town that organize charitable things and so on. And it is that in an outward way. But the Knights of Columbus, if you take it seriously, and if you're a Knight of Columbus that takes being a Knight of Columbus seriously, you know this. It set itself up as the strong right arm of the Catholic Church. As in, it's an organization founded in America, nothing to do with Columbus. Columbus used as the figurehead because it indicates a patriotism. And the purpose of the Knights of Columbus was, A, to convince America that Irish are totally patriotic and with America. And the other side was to further the reach of the good old Catholic Church and its power in America. And by the 1950s, the Knights of Columbus pulled off a pretty awesome, you could really call it in a spiritual sense, in terms of the spiritual war. They pulled off a coup in the 1950s. Until then, America was known to the world and to Americans as being a country founded by Jefferson and friends, and Washington and friends, and your famous Constitution, all these great things and so on, and having a clear separation of matters religious and matters of the state and so on. And around about the 1950s, the Knights of Columbus managed to change all that. They managed to get every little kid in every little school across America that has to say the Pledge of Allegiance every morning to add the words into the Pledge of Allegiance of one nation under God. So if you've ever said those words, if those have been part of a Pledge of Allegiance that you've said, understand that was lobbied for, powerfully lobbied for, supported, pushed for by the Catholic Church through their strong right arm in America, the Knights of Columbus. And it's changed the world's conception of America and America's conception of America. The number of people who think their country, America is an intrinsically Christian-founded country. I mean, talk about, if the Christians are right, well, the poor founding fathers are busy rolling around in their graves shortly before going to hell. Poor fellows. Anyway, so the Knights of Columbus, my point is, they're a powerful organization, and they mean it. And they get involved in the world, and they do stuff. And they do stuff mainly in support of the agendas of the Catholic Church. So bringing us up to the present day, in America, in the state of Arizona, in the county of Maricopa in particular, there arose a strange situation, few forces arising that arise often enough in the world, and the story of Operation Goddess Temple came to be. So the motivations for it, the arising of it, on the one hand, what happened in Maricopa County is a Knight of Columbus who takes his Knight of Columbusing very seriously. Also a Republican politician who's got a great political career mapped out for him, I hear. and has, the right friends from the right universities and things like that, even though he doesn't quite qualify in that league himself. But, he's got the right friends. This fellow, um, it's a strange thing speaking from my country because this wouldn't happen here, but he is a public prosecutor that's also on a political fast track. Why I say that's strange from here in South Africa, a prosecutor, apart from a very few who kind of maybe, very few who are usually just blocked by the government and not allowed to actually do anything. Here, the general situation of a public prosecutor for any territory is that he is the end of the legal profession that can't find any other employment, really. It's not a great career move, I gather, in the legal profession, being a prosecutor, necessarily, unless you're then going into criminal defense after or something like that. It's certainly not a political fast track. In America, it can be. And the strange thing there, very strange, rest of the world handle this, it's a political appointment. You stand for election to be the prosecutor for Maricopa County. And Bill was elected to this position on the Republican ticket. And so he's got the Republican agenda, which is kind of, from outside perspective, not exactly pro-woman in any sense of the word. And he's got, of course, his own Catholic faith and being a Knight of Columbus. As to his Catholic faith, I think the only outward indication we have of that really is that he's married and he has only 2 children, which would mean he's either a very bad Catholic and is using contraception, or he has an exceedingly dismal sex life, which I suppose is okay if you're a Catholic as well. Anyway, Bill has an obvious agenda in terms of prosecuting things that look bad in terms of the Catholic view of things. And there's another pressure in Arizona. There has been moves, you can Google this, to introduce what's been called a sin tax. A sin tax is a fascinating concept. I know in the basic sort of principles of law, we have laws against prostitution, and if you go into the ethics of it, or at least in South Africa, you'll find those laws are on the books supposedly because they're seen as in some way protecting women from prostitution by making it illegal. Maybe they're seen as protecting marriages and men from, from the immorality of prostitution or whatever. But in this area, the escort things, the sexy dancing clubs and that kind of stuff, these things that border on the edge of Christian sexual sin and thereby, the atheist morality within Christian culture as well. This idea that somehow sex and morality have got something to do with each other gets all hooked up. And so these things are prosecuted, or these things are controlled in society. And so sin tax is when your town council or your regional government goes to the local pimps, because making such things illegal means they're high profit, means that there's pimps in the game, means there's, thugs willing to operate in the illegal zone, always in the illegal business, whatever it is. So when your town council goes and negotiates with these thugs and these criminals, these organized criminals, and does a deal with them, like cut us in, pay tax, and you can kind of be in business in a limited way in limited areas or whatever. Called a sin tax. Very clever thing. It ignores the obvious facts that it makes your local government the pimp, and it doesn't remove the real curse of prostitution, which is the pimp. It reinforces the pimp. It gives him even force of law behind him. If you look at the court records of Arizona and you look into how pimps are handled and sentenced and how sex workers are handled and sentenced, just go have a look. You're going to have a good laugh. or a good cry, whichever way you're inclined. So there's a syntax thing happening in Arizona. So there's interest on the government of Arizona end to talk to organized crime and do a deal with them and get in on pimping. This makes freelancers, random freelance, those who don't use pimps, it makes them the competition. And in recent news in Arizona, there's been a thing called Project Rose, which is a combined mission of the police and the Catholic Church working quite literally hand in hand. And the way it works is every policeman available for that kind of duty gets online, gets on emails, gets on cell phone, gets out on the streets and whatever, and tries to get some young lady somewhere to offer him sex in exchange for money. And if they can play the little game or get it close enough to where the policeman can lie that he's played the little game of getting an exact act offered for an exact price, then basically they drag these women off to some church, Project Rose, and give them a choice of get into this church's kind of rehabilitation and repersonality yourself program, or you're facing a bit of a legal issue here with the police. So that they give them a choice of that. So Project Rose has been going down as a way to remove the pimping competition, of the state of Arizona that's now getting into the whoring business. So there's that pressure, and that's happened more recently, in the time between the Operation Goddess Temple raids and now. That's what's sort of been a continuance of the story. So back in 2010, it must have been, because 2011 is when the raids happened. Anyway, well, early 2010. 2011. These two pressures, we've got a prosecutor who's a fanatical Christian, and fanatical Christian in the sense many Christians would say that's no Christian, and I tend to agree, but these are the common labels in the world, so I'll call him that. The word Catholic Taliban has been thrown around Arizona as well, I've seen in discussion and so on. So we've got this fellow with that kind of quite obvious religious agenda. And we've got the sheriff's department and the other stuff talking about syntax and getting all involved with the local mafia and winding up to remove the competition in Project Rose. That hadn't happened yet. But they went really, you could say, they targeted for some reason or other. You can go look at the old news reports online and things and try to work it out yourself if you like. But for one reason or another, one way or another, they picked on a woman, Tracy Elise, of the Goddess Temple of Phoenix. And she rented some sessions rooms, or used some sessions rooms, her practitioners used sessions rooms over in Sedona at another place there. And the place in Sedona where she rented the rooms, this is the nearest thing Tantra in the world has had in recent years to anything like a world center or a particular point of focus, because for several years in a row, conferences happened there and still happen in Sedona every year. And the organization that put these conferences together was headquartered there. That's where the biggest conference happened every year. And then they arranged conferences around the world, which I also was taking part in 2009, 10, and 11. And so by deciding that targeting Tracy Elise was one thing and targeting bigger than that, she was connected to Sedona as well, another town. So somehow it was possible in all of this for old Bill Montgomery, the elected Republican politician, Knight of Columbus, prosecutor of Maricopa County. This enabled him to make a nice big multi-county, Yapave County involved as well, and another one, Pinia, begins with a P. Anyway, multi-county operation, multi-police force involvement, and a big persecutorial mission happened. The way this would have played out, perhaps in most countries, is if Tracy Elise and her work, if that was really prostitution, well, I think most police around the world know how to bust a brothel. You walk in, offer money for a blowjob, get the agreement, and make the bust. I mean, it takes 10 minutes, half an hour. I don't know. Maybe it takes a little bit of research to find out, where's the brothel. But, of course, that's not what they were facing here. They weren't targeting a brothel. Big mistake. Big difference. They were targeting a temple of, something related to what I teach, not frantically close, except that we share the basic thing that we work with sexuality in that way. And some of their teachings and some of the practices that they were doing were of a tantric flavor and persuasion. And there's a lot more. Tracy Elise has a rich history, a rich exploration of spirituality, and I'm sure, like all dakinis, all women in this area of power, she brings all of it into her work. And she... So the Phoenix Goddess Temple in Arizona got targeted. And it didn't involve just, a policeman walks up to the door, asks things, and then makes arrests. I mean, anyway, with such a place, you can't do that. I do not believe you could arrive at the Phoenix Goddess Temple and say, here, I've got a couple of $100 or whatever, I'd like a blowjob. I think they might have taken a while to explain things to you and steady you down and explain this is, a spiritual pursuit. There's a different intent here. It's either for your healing or it's for your spiritual development, and or maybe both, if you can separate these things. And the police found they couldn't just do that. So they did what turned out to be a 6-month-long, I kid you not, 6-month-long undercover undercover trained operatives involving planting spy cams and such like at the Phoenix Goddess Temple. Now, I mean, I've explained 2 of the major motivations. I see there's a possible third one, is researching Bill Montgomery's own history a little bit. He's a military school boy, so that's like what I would call a boarding school boy, the English kind of boarding school thing, and he seems to have done that from quite young. His religion is misogynist in its very essence, but he seems to, have a bit of a streak of that going too. But more to the point, that kind of raising, not having the American college experience, like I know about the American college experience. I've never been to America or to an American college, but I've seen the movies, the American Pie series of movies, and they explain it quite well. That is the stage of life at which American youth is supposed to get through, and over and get a bit beyond, a bit more mature than the urge to peek through keyholes and, spy on the girls' changing rooms and, that kind of immature kind of, slightly pre-adolescent sort of sexual interest and prurience. But Bill didn't go to such a school, so it does look like maybe there's another motivation there, that he just didn't really get that opportunity. And now here he is, a knight of God, in a position of awesome power, getting to choose what's a crime, what's not, what kind of things get investigated, and so on. And in a position to divert a whole lot of money that could investigate house burglaries and things into a whole 6-month operation against really what you could say is the Catholic Church's most archetypal enemy, is women who know their spirituality. and he gets to target them. He gets to be a hero for the faith and take down, um, you know, a rival religion on the basis of prostitution laws. And I think, some ironic and rather obvious things just seem to slip everyone's notice, including the judges, the lawyers, everyone else involved in this, is naturally the obvious defense for the Phoenix Goddess Temple would be, this isn't prostitution. This is people make a donation. This is, we do spiritual work. We work with sexuality, with conscious intent. And it's a very, very different thing indeed from what you would find in any brothel, and it's a very different thing from what any customer of a brothel would be really prepared to pay for. But these little difficulties of it not actually really being in any frameable way prostitution just meant that it had to be a real long, hard investigation. Now, 6 months, if it takes 6 months to investigate a brothel, and the law has a principle of reasonable doubt, well, I think you're looking at more than seriously reasonable doubt if it just took 6 months long. And also, let's see what their investigation achieved in 6 months. Well, really giving them every benefit of the doubt, I'd say it looks more or less the same as if I decided to target, let's say, St. Mary's Catholic Church in Gilbert, Arizona, where possibly Bill and his family go to church. And if I decided, well, there it is, and I want to do the same thing to it as Bill has done to the Goddess Temple, well, simple strategy. In 6 months, I'm pretty sure that I could join that church, make a bunch of donations, get video footage of donations being made, and in 6 months, okay, maybe not me, maybe some younger, better-looking Tantra fellow could probably seduce. In fact, it probably happens randomly that in any given 6 months, someone in that church hooks up with someone in that church, and they might end up making love. And of course, they don't really do it in the church, but they might kiss and they might do a few things. But if one followed them and used the same kind of spy cam investigatory kind of attitude of Bill, I mean, he didn't stop with Tracy's Temple, his operation extended to Sedona where she had rooms and things like that. So if you took that attitude, I'm pretty sure you could put together a little couple of spy cam video footages of giving donation to the church and making love with one of the choir girls, one of the nice ladies in the church. Over 6 months, I'm sure it happens every now and again, quite randomly anyway. But if one could video camera this happening, well, then one could walk in and bust the priest as a pimp and cart away everyone else and, attach all the church's assets, prosecute them intensively as being obviously a brothel. People would not take that terribly seriously, but that's exactly what they managed to do in 6 months around the Goddess Temple. So after 6 months of this, they had, between the various bits of video footage and of course the way you edit it and so on, because none of this footage has been shown, has been allowed to be seen, except in private little meetings with Bill and friends, But apart from those little quiet little things I've heard rumors of happening in the Sedona back rooms of the police station, little private showings for important people and things like that, there's just basically it took 6 months, and now they've got a little bit of film showing someone making a donation, someone doing something sexy, and they can put it together and make a case. And I said then, they can walk in and make arrests. Well, walk in. No, they don't do that these days. No. Sometimes the police in America are accused of doing things in a way punitively, going in kind of heavy-handed, as at Ferguson and so on, going in hard and unnecessarily. And of course their argument, typically a good argument, is they don't know what they're facing, Someone they're walking into might have a machine gun. They need a machine gun. Someone walking into them might have a hand grenade. They need grenades. These things called flashbangs, they're grenades. Okay. Waco, Texas established that fact. But they get heavy-handed. Now, in this particular case, they really did have no excuse because Nobody knew the temples better than the police. They had spy cams throughout the places anyway. Throughout the place, they really knew the operation. They'd been investigating it for 6 months. They knew exactly how many mortars, how many heavy machine guns, and how many handguns they were facing, and they knew that the number was 0. They knew that. They knew that these were places where love happens, where there's I don't think anyone has so much of a weapon as a baseball bat or a half brick really handy anywhere around these places. So they did an absolutely, as you would expect from a Knight of Columbus, a totally punitive, hardcore, guns in the faces, cops on Adderall, twitchy fingers on the triggers, and all that fun stuff. They hit these places, Tracy's Temple, Sedona Temple, and Tracy early in dawn Nazi style, 4 a.m. old apartheid South Africa style raid at 4 a.m. in the morning, or early morning anyway, before the main wave of arrests, and altogether made like 30-something arrests. And go Google Operation Goddess Temple and you'll see Bill Montgomery and Steve Martos of the Phoenix Police Department crowing about their awesome bust, their great victory, and it probably had a little bit to do with Bill doing quite well in the 2012 elections, managing to keep his job. That people don't seem to mind if house robberies go uninvestigated as long as they're busting, who's doing unauthorized sex. Anyway, so they hit really hard, made a lot of arrests. And then, of course, this is not new for America. This is not my observation. They did the standard procedure in America, which is forcing a confession to some level of crime so that everyone involved can get their bonuses and commissions and kudos along the line, and the state can keep its prison contracts in terms of the degree to which it's supposed to keep its prisons full, and get the thing plea bargained out. Now, of course, the general strategy is, and the one that they used very strongly. I mean, sit down, Google around, you'll find the jails in Arizona have, especially Maricopa County, they have a bad reputation. These are not comfortable places. Some of them are just even tent camps. It's getting all third world out there. But anyway, so the basic strategy goes like this: is here we've bust you. Yes, you're a citizen. Yes, you've got rights. Yes, you're entitled to bail, and so on and so on and so on. But your bail conditions are very onerous. In Tracy's case, they asked for $500,000. Now, if this was Heidi Fleiss, well, the lawyers would have arrived half an hour later with the suitcase. But it's not Heidi Fleiss. This is not prostitution. Prostitution has a work rate. Prostitution has a work rate that the state wants to cash in on with its syntax. Tracy's things, according to their accusations from their undercover spy cam investigations, the women in her temple did up to note 3 sessions a day. That sounds about right for Tantra people and Tantra sessions. It's intense work, it's emotionally deep, it's very different from sex work. Can you imagine any decent brothel in the world where the whores get to do up to 3 clients a day? There was a little hint that this wasn't quite the average brothel bill, but, you missed the little details maybe. But so anyway, she's not in the money league of Heidi Fleiss, let's put it that way. And then friends rallied, and there was some support for her. And it looked like she could make, the 10% of that a bail bondsman would require, and it looked like she may be able to actually get out on bail. They promptly raised it to $1 million. And when they did eventually release her on bail, I believe Tracy did something like 2 years entire. 2 years locked up without a trial. Fascinating country, fascinating legal system. but really 2 years entire inside. Anyway, when they eventually did get to the bail conditions, it was things like the old gag orders in the old South Africa, being a banned person. I mean, Tracy wasn't allowed to talk to her co-accused, the public, friends around the community, just absolutely silenced. I mean, real draconian stuff. Wow. It's quite awesome how some of America really starts to look like South Africa of the apartheid days. But anyway, that's also a common search phrase. Search apartheid Arizona, you find a lot of people are drawing that parallel. Not my idea either. So 2 years in jail for Tracy, and she's brave. She's one tough woman. She's one real woman of power. She took all of that, and all the way along being offered, come on, plead guilty to this, and then it goes away, sort of thing, take a plea bargain. And the state's lawyers that they gave her, they said to her, come on, take a plea bargain, this is the way to go. And we're not going to represent you if you don't. We can't, because we'll make our names, we'll make our fellow legal professionals happy with us. I mean, this pressure to get a plea bargain or whatever. There was another woman over at the Sedona Temple who'd been arrested. Now, she was in the Yopave County system. And they obviously weren't so much with the program, because they said to her, look, just plead, take a plea on marijuana possession. How about that? She said, but there wasn't any marijuana. They said, it doesn't matter. Take a plea on that anyway, just so we get, the okay on the books, and, Tracy gets more against her because there's more obviously guilty, more guilty people there are from the raid, the more obviously everyone's guilty. And this other brave woman said, no. I'm not pleading guilty to that. If you want to face us down in court, let's go there. And they said, oh, all right, just go away. But this didn't happen with Tracy. They didn't say just go away. They kept it on to the max, and it's round about now, hitting trial. There's been a couple of hearings. There's been a few arguments heard. The most glaring, funny bit in the story, the sad bit in the story, right now, is that let's face it, it's hard to see this raid as not religiously motivated. It's hard to see that Tracy's practice, her religious intent, and so on, is not at all relevant to the issues. But the awesome American legal system has managed to give the prosecutors the room that they've managed to get that removed as a defense and a point of discussion. Bill Montgomery's religion isn't something that gets to go into the court. Tracy's religious persuasion isn't something that gets to go into court. All that gets to go into court is, did someone give money, and did sex happen? And can we overlook that it took 6 months for these two things to happen? Enough in some way that we could get some kind of documentation of it. Look, the case and the whole bust and the whole thing, obviously on a legal level, it was never intended to go anywhere near a trial. This was to make a nice couple of headlines for Bill. This was to have everyone plea bargain out, and for the competition for the pimping state of Arizona getting involved in syntaxing and sharing the stuff with the pimps, getting that business competition out the way. So I think the interesting thing now for America is that if the news services get a bit interested in the story again, we're all very interested when the bust happened, and all very happy to assume guilt in all their storylines. Damn, it was rare to find but don't we have civilized principles kind of report coming out amidst the sort of deluge of condemnation. But it'll be interesting to see if the trial end of it, and of course the following actions, which will be Tracy going for a little bit of compensation for these rather severe violations, getting that all wrapped up. I realized I diverted a little bit earlier from my story, and I'm not going to edit this. This is a laptop talk. I was talking about the police. Oh no, I did mention the police went in all heavy-handed. Yeah. Let me go back and check if you don't believe me. I remember. All right. So where does that put things now? Well, Project Rose has been running around doing its thing. And I don't know, it's a strange phenomenon. You would think that this kind of thing would be really a non-issue these days, that the sexual maturity of the world had moved on, but it hasn't. Repression is still strong. I know it looks like the young, the 20-somethings and so on, that they're really exploring and really getting out there, and they are doing better than the generation before them and the generation before that, and all the other generations all the way up to my generation. Yes, they've been easing and they've been maturing. But now don't forget, Bill Montgomery, my kind of age, I think. People that are running the country, 70 plus, typically, certainly 60 plus. And repression's still a factor. And repression basically keeps the sexuality on an individual and also on a cultural level, it keeps it retarded. This is why America looks so adolescent at the moment in its sexual expression and its advertising, and it's very, very adolescent. I'll talk about that in another talk. But about this, these fellows that are wielding power at the moment, it's something to watch out for. You know, the newly won rights for gay people and what the polyamorists are trying to do, and all of you that try and explore alternative ways, or don't necessarily think that the one nation under the Catholic God is the right way to go. There are strong forces in play that I think you guys in America should maybe pay attention to, and the Knights of Columbus have shown up in this story to be mostly an unnoticed but awesomely powerful moving force. Don't forget, on the kind of overt end, they're a businessman's club. So, there's the social involvement and possibly the syntax involvement. Who knows? I don't know if any of the local pimps in town are part of that organization. If I was in Arizona, I'd be busy, any newspaper reporters there. That sounds like there's a few interesting stories here if you still want to try and do a good old make your name with news the old way. Apparently also this is not unusual. These kind of busts, these kind of raids, this kind of harassment and persecution across the line from conscious work, sacred sexual work, sex work, prostitution, all the various lines of it, all the various divisions, that's the whole area is getting attacked. And I would suggest that the Catholic Church, having got round to getting one nation under God, etc., established on a national level, in the state of Arizona, where they seem to be fairly strong, they're now kind of really going for, well, that phrase Catholic Taliban kind of fits. Rule in terms of the religious laws, in terms of the religious views of their particular religion. This is also the state where they've put a freedom of religion law in that companies, corporations, businesses, may now have religious rights, as in a Catholic company doesn't want to pay for birth control as a health benefit for its workers. Now, a company having rights, as having religious rights, well, we already fell for the whole legal fiction of a company or corporation having what we call human rights, when obviously that's a just insanely inapplicable concept, but we did it in the world. But now a company having religious rights, I don't see how that can fly unless the Pope is willing to acknowledge that a corporation has a soul and that he has the power to excommunicate it if it's bad. Um, I mean, from the standpoint of Catholic theology, I see all sorts of insanely difficult problems with that. But somehow in the state of Arizona, they've overcome those problems. And if you're a business owner in Arizona, your religious rights are protected in that kind of way. Presumably, you don't have to serve gay people in your restaurant or whatever. I don't know how far it goes. But if your religion happens to be the worship of the goddess and the understanding of the possibility of accessing aspects of meditation, aspects of divinity, aspects of consciousness and awareness through sexual practices, well, then it seems suddenly you're not protected by that law in Arizona. Not at all. In fact, Tracy's attempts, as far as I've heard, to get her religious position regarded as relevant by the court has been completely overruled by, I think it's Jan Brew is the governor. I forget, the Judge Stevens would be the judge. Apparently, it looks, it's done like many things. It's not like, I don't think Judge Stevens had to actually make a ruling that, yes, the religion of your prosecutors, the religion of your accusers, and your own religion in this issue over religiously moral, historical, anti-sexual law in all of this religion is not an issue. I don't think she has stood up and made such a declaration. I think it's just been allowed to slip by in the paperwork that motions were made, possibly while Tracy was still held into conditions where she couldn't defend herself, and were passed. But however the wrangling and the wiggles of the law go, the bottom line is here's a religious assault with a religious person using his public office to pursue his religious agenda, pulling it off quite handsomely. And, oh well, if Tracy had crumbled at any point, he'd have got away with it. But there's going to be a little bit of a snapback now, of course, because I very much doubt he's going to get his conviction. And if he does, it's not going to be a solid, a firm, a believable, or a serious level one. And I think he's going to be open to civil suits and so on. America has an interesting corrective kind of system in that way. So I think we watch with interest to see what happens. What it means for the wider spiritually interested world, and by spiritually interested I really include atheists and anyone who has an attitude to preventing the more negative aspects of spirituality in the world. It's a bit of a clear case of, I'm sorry, first they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up for I wasn't a Jew, and so on and so on. This is a start. This is the Catholic Church hitting its most archetypal enemy. I'm not sure who's next, but one day it's going to get down to the Lutherans. They're also an enemy of Holy Mother Church. You Americans are having a resurgence in your religious fervor, very much like has been happening in the Middle East. You're in a way fulfilling the saying that you become what you oppose. And you go out in the world there to oppose the Taliban and free women and so on. I mean, as the overt kind of reasons for what you're doing, I suppose. And look what's happening at home. And I just urge you all over there, pay attention, pay attention. Some ugly, ugly things are happening in a beautiful place that had some beautiful principles that rolled in quite beautiful lines. Principles close to my own heart. I go further than the Founding Fathers. I have the Taoist attitude of people find their best way according purely to their own inclinations. Like, you've got to have a really good reason to want to intervene in that, ever. But the level of intervention now, the political tensioning, the internet observation tensioning, and now the religious tensioning. This war on sex is also a war on alternative religion. And it doesn't look good so far. The degree to which Tracy has had support come to her, the degrees to which he's been helped, it hasn't been nothing. It hasn't been insignificant, but it's been pathetic. It's been weak. And there are a lot of various religious and lifestyle persuasion and preference people that are kind of next on the line of this Catholic war. So if you consider yourself a spiritual warrior in any sense of the word, or spiritually curious or politically curious, go dig a little bit around this story, get some opinions, share the story, let people know about Operation Goddess Temple, and let the news media know that the story's fresh again, and all the way from 2011 till now. For some people, it's been a living nightmare the whole way. And things are now flaming. Things are now coming to a head. Things will now be seen. We can now ask Bill Montgomery, like, was it worth the expense? Was it worth it? Did you get great videos? And a little side appeal, if anyone's listening that hangs out with the Anon Ops and the other anonymous guys, here's a little request from me. Come on. Somebody's got to liberate some of that footage. Come on. Do it. Okay. Enough for today.